What if I told you that the moment someone destroys your career could become the exact moment you destroy their entire empire? This is the story of how I went from being publicly humiliated to orchestrating the most expensive corporate takedown in history. And it all started with 2 words that would haunt him forever. The fluorescent lights in the boardroom felt like spotlights burning into my skin. 23 executives sat around that mahogany table, their eyes drilling into me as Marcus Thornfield, the CEO of Nexus Technologies, stood at the head like a king delivering judgment. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his tailored suit immaculate, and his smile. God, that smile was pure venom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice echoing off the glass walls, "I want you all to witness this moment." He gestured toward me with theatrical flair. Dr. Elena Vasquez, our former head of innovation. Former, because as of this moment. He paused, savoring every second. "You're fired." The words hit like a physical blow. 23 pairs of eyes watched as my world crumbled. Some looked shocked. Others couldn't hide their satisfaction. The VP of sales actually smirked. But what they didn't expect was my response. I stood up slowly, smoothed my black blazer, looked Marcus directly in the eye, and said 2 words that would change everything: "Thank you." The room fell silent. Marcus's triumphant expression flickered with confusion. He expected tears, begging, maybe even anger. Instead, I gathered my files with steady hands, nodded once more, and walked out of that boardroom with my head held high. 24 hours later, Marcus Thornfield would discover that firing me wasn't just a mistake. It was corporate suicide. But let me take you back to where this nightmare began, because what you're about to hear will show you exactly why revenge is a dish best served cold, and worth $1.5 billion. 6 months earlier, I was living my dream. Dr. Elena Vasquez, youngest female head of innovation in Nexus Technologies history. While other kids played with toys, I was building circuits. While they watched cartoons, I was reading patent applications like bedtime stories. My childhood bedroom walls weren't covered with posters of pop stars, but with blueprints and invention sketches. At 28, I held 17 patents. At 32, I'd revolutionized 3 entire industries. And at 35, I created something that would change the world forever: the Quantum Processing Interface, or QPI. Picture a computer chip smaller than your thumbnail that could process information faster than entire server farms. Imagine artificial intelligence that could solve climate change, cure diseases, and unlock the mysteries of the universe. That's what QPI represented. That's what I built. That's what I sacrificed everything for. For 2 years, I worked 18-hour days in the basement labs of Nexus Technologies. I missed birthdays, holidays, relationships. I poured my soul into that invention while Marcus Thornfield took credit for every breakthrough in board meetings I wasn't invited to. But I didn't care about the glory. I cared about the science. I cared about changing the world. And foolishly, I trusted the company I'd given my life to. The morning of my presentation to the board, I walked into that same conference room with confidence. My research was flawless. My prototype was perfect. I had documentation proving QPI could generate over $2 billion in the first year alone. "Impressive work, Dr. Vasquez," Marcus had said, his tone warm and encouraging. "Truly groundbreaking. We'll need some time to review everything, but I have a feeling this could be exactly what Nexus needs." I smiled. I actually smiled and thanked him. That was my first mistake. 3 weeks later, I received an email that made my blood freeze. It was a press release announcement. Nexus Technologies CEO Marcus Thornfield unveils revolutionary quantum processing interface. Below the headline was a photo of Marcus holding MY prototype, MY invention, with the caption "Visionary leader develops game-changing technology." I read it 3 times before the rage hit. My name appeared nowhere in the article. 2 years of my life, reduced to a footnote buried in technical specifications. Marcus Thornfield was being hailed as the next Steve Jobs, while I remained invisible in my basement laboratory. I stormed into his office that afternoon, clutching printed copies of every email, every design document, every piece of evidence proving QPI was my creation. "Marcus, we need to talk." He looked up from his computer with that same venomous smile. "Ah, Elena. What can I do for you? You know exactly what you can do for me. That press release is a lie. QPI is my invention. My work. My 2 years of research and development." He leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "Is it, though? According to your employment contract, all work performed while under the employ of Nexus Technologies becomes intellectual property of the company. I'm simply the face of that company. Being the face of the company doesn't mean stealing credit for work you didn't do." "Stealing?" His eyebrows rose in mock surprise. "That's a strong word, Elena. I prefer to think of it as leadership. Someone has to represent our innovations to the world. Someone with the gravitas, the experience, the vision to the vision. Marcus, you didn't even know what QPI stood for until I explained it to you. Careful, Elena." His voice turned cold. "You're walking a very thin line." But I was too angry to be careful. "The press release needs to be corrected. My name needs to be included as the primary inventor. This isn't negotiable." He stood up slowly, his 6-foot frame towering over my desk. "Actually, it is negotiable. And I'm not interested in negotiating. The press release stands as written. QPI is a Nexus innovation under my leadership. End of discussion. This isn't over, Marcus." "Oh, but it is." His smile returned, colder than before. "And Elena, I'd be very careful about making threats. Especially threats you can't back up." I left his office shaking with rage and determination. If Marcus Thornfield wanted to play games, I'd show him exactly what kind of player he was dealing with. That night, I started documenting everything. Every email that proved my ownership of QPI. Every timestamp showing when I created each component. Every witness who could testify to my authorship. I built an ironclad case that would expose Marcus for the fraud he was. But Marcus Thornfield hadn't become a Fortune 500 CEO by being stupid. He saw my research, my late nights, my determination to reclaim my work. And he decided to end the threat before it began. The setup was masterful, I'll give him that. It started with small things. My keycard access to certain labs was accidentally revoked. Research budgets for my projects were temporarily frozen pending review. My assistant was reassigned to higher priority initiatives. Then came the bigger moves. Important meetings were scheduled without informing me. My team members were gradually moved to other departments. My email access became unreliable due to system updates. I fought back every step of the way, documenting each instance of sabotage. But Marcus stayed one step ahead, always with plausible explanations and corporate doublespeak that made my complaints sound like paranoid accusations. The final trap came disguised as an opportunity. "Elena," Marcus called me into his office on a Friday afternoon. "I've been thinking about our conversation regarding QPI recognition. You were right. You deserve more credit for your contributions." I studied his face, searching for the catch. "What are you proposing?" "A presentation to the full board. Next Friday. You'll have 30 minutes to present QPI in your own words, with full attribution to your work. Sound fair?" It sounded too good to be true. It was too good to be true. "What's the catch, Marcus?" "No catch. Just, make sure your presentation is perfect. The board has high standards, and this is your moment to shine. Don't waste it." I spent that entire weekend preparing. Charts, graphs, technical specifications, financial projections. Every slide was perfect. Every word was rehearsed. This was my chance to reclaim my invention and expose Marcus's theft. Monday morning, I arrived at the office early to make final preparations. But when I tried to access my files, my computer wouldn't log in. "System maintenance," IT explained. "Should be resolved by afternoon." Tuesday, my presentation files were corrupted. "Virus scan quarantine," they said. "We're working on recovery." Wednesday, the boardroom was double booked. "Scheduling error. We'll reschedule for Friday as planned." Thursday night, I worked until 3 a.m. reconstructing my presentation from backup notes and personal files. It wasn't as polished as the original, but it would prove my point. Friday morning, I walked into that boardroom confident that truth would prevail. I should have known better. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus announced to the assembled executives, we're here today to address some serious concerns about Dr. Vasquez's recent performance and conduct. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't the presentation he'd promised. This was an ambush. Over the past several weeks, Dr. Vasquez has made increasingly erratic claims about her role in developing our QPI technology. She's disrupted meetings, made unfounded accusations against company leadership, and created a hostile work environment for her colleagues. I tried to speak, but he held up a hand for silence. Furthermore, our IT department has discovered evidence of attempted corporate espionage. Dr. Vasquez has been accessing confidential files outside her clearance level and copying proprietary information to personal devices. The room erupted in whispers. My throat closed up. This was impossible. The evidence is overwhelming, Marcus continued, clicking through slides I'd never seen before. Screenshots of file access logs with my username. Security footage of me working late that somehow looked suspicious. Email conversations taken out of context to suggest corporate sabotage. Every piece of evidence was fabricated, but it was brilliantly crafted. Convincing. Damning. Therefore, Marcus's voice rose to silence the room. For the good of this company and the integrity of our work, I'm left with no choice. He turned to face me directly, and in that moment, I saw the truth in his eyes. This had been planned from the beginning. Every friendly conversation, every promised opportunity, every moment of trust I'd given him, it was all leading to this moment. Dr. Elena Vasquez, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, you're fired. The words echoed in the sudden silence. 23 executives stared at me with expressions ranging from shock to satisfaction to pity. I felt my career, my reputation, my life's work crumbling around me. But in that moment of complete devastation, something crystallized in my mind. A plan so audacious, so perfectly poetic, that it actually made me smile. I stood up slowly, smoothed my blazer, looked Marcus directly in his triumphant eyes, and said the two words that would seal his fate, thank you. The confusion on his face was worth everything I was about to lose. Because Marcus Thornfield had made one critical mistake in his perfectly executed plan. He'd been so focused on destroying my reputation that he'd forgotten to check whether I actually owned the patents he'd stolen. You see, 2 years earlier, when I first started developing QPI, I'd filed provisional patents under my personal name. Not Nexus Technologies. My name. It was a standard practice for independent researchers, a way to establish creation dates before formal employment agreements kicked in. Marcus had stolen credit for my invention, but he hadn't stolen the legal rights to my invention. And as I walked out of that boardroom, I was already calculating exactly how much his mistake would cost him. That afternoon, while Marcus celebrated his victory with champagne in his corner office, I made a phone call that would change everything. Richardson, Kozlov Associates, this is Janet speaking. I need to speak with David Richardson immediately. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez. I'm sorry, Mr. Richardson is in a meeting, tell him it's about a $1.5 billion patent dispute. He'll take the call. 3 minutes later, David Richardson, the most feared patent attorney on the East Coast, was on the line. Elena, I heard what happened. Marcus made a mistake. A very expensive mistake. Can you meet me tonight? I'm already clearing my schedule. That evening, in a coffee shop 3 blocks from Nexus headquarters, I laid out my plan to David Richardson. He listened in silence, occasionally making notes, his expression growing more amazed with each detail. Elena, he said finally, this is either the most brilliant corporate maneuver I've ever seen, or it's complete suicide. Which do you think it is? He smiled, the kind of smile that made opposing lawyers wake up in cold sweats. I think Marcus Thornfield just made the most expensive mistake in corporate history. So you'll represent me? Elena, I wouldn't miss this for the world. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of anxiety, but because of anticipation. For 2 years, I'd lived in Marcus's shadow, watching him take credit for my work, my brilliance, my sacrifices. Tomorrow, I would step out of that shadow and into the light. But first, I had a phone call to make. At 6 a.m. Saturday morning, I dialed a number I'd memorized but never thought I'd use. Quantum Dynamics Corporation, this is emergency services. I need to speak with CEO Catherine Morrison. Tell her Dr. Elena Vasquez is calling about a quantum processing patent that might interest her. Catherine Morrison was Marcus's biggest nightmare. Former MIT prodigy, current CEO of Quantum Dynamics, and the one competitor who consistently outmaneuvered Nexus Technologies in government contracts. If Marcus was the king of corporate ambition, Catherine was the queen of corporate warfare. Dr. Vasquez, Catherine's voice was crisp and intrigued. I heard about yesterday's events at Nexus. I'm sorry. Don't be. I'm calling with a business proposition. I'm listening. How would you like to purchase exclusive rights to quantum processing interface technology that could make your company the undisputed leader in AI development? There was a long pause. That sounds like Nexus technology. Actually, it sounds like MY technology. Technology that Marcus Thornfield has been using without proper licensing agreements. Another pause, longer this time. Dr. Vasquez, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying I own the patents to QPI technology, and I'm looking for a buyer who can properly appreciate its value. Can you be at my office in 2 hours? I'll be there in 1. The Quantum Dynamics headquarters building was everything Nexus wasn't: sleek, modern, innovative. Where Nexus felt like an old boys club pretending to be cutting edge, Quantum Dynamics actually was cutting edge. Catherine Morrison met me in the lobby personally. She was younger than Marcus, probably early 40s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a handshake that conveyed both respect and warning. Dr. Vasquez, I've been following your work for years. Frankly, I'm amazed Nexus let you go. They didn't let me go. They fired me for asking too many uncomfortable questions. About QPI ownership. Among other things. She led me to a conference room where 3 other executives waited, the CTO, the head of legal, and someone introduced simply as our acquisitions specialist. Before we continue, Catherine said, settling into her chair, I need to understand exactly what you're offering. I placed a thick folder on the table. Complete and exclusive licensing rights to quantum processing interface technology, including all current implementations and future developments. The CTO leaned forward. Current implementations? You mean the system Nexus has been promoting? The system Nexus has been using illegally. The patents are in my name, filed 2 years ago, with clear documentation of creation dates and ownership rights. Catherine's legal counsel opened the folder and began scanning documents. His eyebrows rose progressively higher as he read. This is comprehensive, he said finally. If these documents are authentic, Nexus has been operating in violation of federal patent law. They're authentic, I confirmed. David Richardson verified everything yesterday. Richardson? Catherine's eyes widened. You retained Richardson? He retained me. Apparently, he's been waiting for a case like this his entire career. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Catherine spoke. Dr. Vasquez, if we purchase these licensing rights, Nexus will have to cease all QPI operations immediately or face federal patent infringement charges. That's correct. And given the current market valuation of QPI technology, they'll lose everything. The acquisitions specialist finished. Every government contract, every development project, every partnership that depends on quantum processing. Which is why, I said calmly, the licensing fee is $1.5 billion. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Even in a room full of executives accustomed to large numbers, $1.5 billion commanded respect. That's substantial, Catherine said carefully. It's exactly what Nexus projected in first-year revenue from QPI technology. Revenue they've been planning to earn using my patents without my permission. And if we agree to this purchase, then Quantum Dynamics becomes the exclusive owner of the most revolutionary computing technology in history, while simultaneously eliminating your biggest competitor. Catherine looked at her team. Silent conversations passed between them in glances and subtle nods. Dr. Vasquez, Catherine said finally, I need to ask you something directly. Is this about justice, or is this about revenge? I considered the question carefully. Both. Marcus Thornfield destroyed my career, stole my work, and humiliated me in front of the entire industry. But more than that, his representing technology one created as his own innovation. That's not just personal betrayal, it's corporate fraud. And you're sure the patents will hold up in court? David Richardson is sure. And David Richardson doesn't take cases he can't win. Catherine stood up and walked to the window overlooking the city. From this height, I could see the Nexus Technologies building in the distance, its silver facade gleaming in the morning sun. Dr. Vasquez, Catherine said without turning around, what you're proposing isn't just a patent purchase. It's corporate warfare. I know. If we do this, Marcus Thornfield won't just lose money. He'll lose everything. His reputation, his company, possibly his freedom if fraud charges stick. I know. And you're comfortable with that level of consequences? I thought about every 18-hour day I'd worked in those basement labs. Every breakthrough moment when I'd solved impossible problems. Every sacrifice I'd made for science that Marcus had claimed as his own vision. He made his choice when he decided to steal my life's work. I'm just making sure he pays the appropriate price. Catherine turned back to face me, and I saw my own determination reflected in her eyes. Then let's make history. The contracts took 6 hours to finalize. 6 hours of legal language, technical specifications, and financial arrangements that would transfer ownership of my patents from me to Quantum Dynamics, and transfer $1.5 billion from Quantum Dynamics to me. But the most important clause was buried on page 47. Licensor grants purchaser exclusive rights to pursue all legal remedies against current unauthorized users of licensed technology, including but not limited to cease and desist orders, financial damages, and criminal patent fraud charges. At 8 p.m. Saturday night, I signed the papers that would destroy Marcus Thornfield. At 8:30 p.m., Catherine Morrison called her legal team and gave them 2 words, do it. Sunday morning, while Marcus Thornfield was probably playing golf at his country club, a team of federal marshals and patent attorneys walked into Nexus Technologies headquarters with enough legal documentation to shut down the entire quantum processing division. But I wasn't there to see it. I was on a plane to Switzerland, where my new bank account was waiting for the largest single deposit in my life. $1.5 billion. The money was nice, but it wasn't the real prize. The real prize came Monday morning, when my phone started ringing. The first call was from Catherine Morrison. Elena, it's done. Federal marshals seized all QPI prototypes and documentation at 6 a.m. this morning. Nexus stock has dropped 40% in pre-market trading. Marcus tried to reach you 17 times. I'll bet he did. There's more. The SEC is launching an investigation into corporate fraud charges. If they can prove Marcus knowingly used your patents illegally, he's looking at federal criminal charges. I smiled, watching Swiss mountains pass by my hotel window. What about the rest of the leadership team? The board called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. Word is they're discussing Marcus's immediate termination. Perfect. Elena, there's something else. We want to offer you a position. Chief Innovation Officer, full autonomy over quantum development, and equity stakes that could make you one of the richest women in tech. It was tempting. More than tempting. But I had other plans. Catherine, I appreciate the offer. But I think I'm going to start my own company. With $1.5 billion in startup capital, you could build quite an empire. That's the idea. The second call came an hour later. Unknown number, but I recognized the panicked voice immediately. Elena, thank God you answered. This is Marcus. We need to talk. Hello, Marcus. Enjoying your Monday morning? Elena, listen to me carefully. Whatever you think you're doing, we can work this out. Come back to Nexus. We'll give you whatever you want. Credit for QPI, your own division, a seat on the board. Marcus, I think you're confused. I don't work for Nexus anymore. Remember? You fired me. That was a mistake. A horrible mistake. Please, Elena, be reasonable. This lawsuit will destroy thousands of jobs. People who had nothing to do with our disagreement will lose their livelihoods. You should have thought about that before you stole my patents. I didn't steal anything. The employment contract states that work performed while employed belongs to the company. But QPI wasn't developed while I was employed, Marcus. I filed the provisional patents 6 months before I signed with Nexus. The silence on the other end was beautiful. That's impossible. We have records of development timelines, records that show continued development and improvement, yes. But not initial creation. Initial creation happened in my garage, 6 months before I ever walked into a Nexus building. Elena, please. I'm begging you. Name your price. Anything you want. I already got my price, Marcus. $1.5 billion from your biggest competitor. You sold the patents. To Catherine Morrison. Exclusive licensing rights, actually. Which means Quantum Dynamics now owns QPI technology, and you're in violation of federal patent law. This is insane. You can't destroy an entire company over a personal vendetta. I'm not destroying anything, Marcus. I'm just collecting what was always mine. The line went quiet except for his heavy breathing. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. You have no idea what you've done, Elena. Nexus has connections you can't imagine. Resources you can't fight. If you think this is over, actually, Marcus, it is over. Your legal department should have received federal cease and desist orders by now. Your QPI operations are shut down effective immediately. And your board meeting this afternoon? They're going to discuss your termination for cause. How could you possibly know about the board meeting? Because Catherine Morrison called 3 board members this morning and offered them positions at Quantum Dynamics. Turns out, most of them have been unhappy with your leadership for quite some time. Another silence. Longer this time. Elena, what have you become? I've become exactly what you taught me to become, Marcus. Someone who plays to win. I hung up and turned off my phone. The Swiss Alps looked beautiful in the afternoon sunlight, and I had a celebration dinner to get to. But the real celebration came Tuesday morning, when I turned my phone back on and found 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, and 215 emails. The first email was from David Richardson. Elena, it's even better than we hoped. SEC filed criminal fraud charges this morning. Marcus was arrested at his home at 6 a.m. Bail set at $50 million. Call me. The second email was from Catherine Morrison. Emergency board meeting yesterday resulted in unanimous vote for Marcus's termination. Nexus stock down 72. Multiple class action lawsuits filed. We may need to discuss acquisition of entire company. The third email was from someone I didn't expect. James Chen, former Nexus CTO and Marcus's closest ally. Dr. Vasquez, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I wanted you to know that what Marcus did to you was unconscionable. Several of us tried to speak up during the board meeting, but Marcus had made it clear that opposing him meant losing our jobs. I'm sorry we didn't have your courage. If you ever need character witnesses for your legal case, you have my full support. I scrolled through dozens of similar emails. Colleagues who had watched Marcus steal my work and remained silent were now eager to testify about his fraud. The same executives who had sat quietly during my humiliation were now competing to offer statements supporting my case. It was almost disappointing how quickly they abandoned him once he lost power. But the email that surprised me most came from someone I'd never met, Sarah Thornfield, Marcus's daughter. Dr. Vasquez, I'm writing to apologize for my father's actions. I've been following your case in the news, and I want you to know that not everyone in our family supported what he did to you. I'm a computer science student at MIT, and I know enough about patents and intellectual property to understand that he committed fraud. I hope you get the justice you deserve. Even his own family was abandoning him. Wednesday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Nexus Technologies CEO Marcus Thornfield sentenced to federal prison. The headline was everything I'd dreamed of during those long nights planning my revenge. But the article itself was even better. Former Nexus CEO Marcus Thornfield was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison yesterday for patent fraud, corporate theft, and securities manipulation. The charges stem from his illegal use of quantum processing technology patented by Dr. Elena Vasquez, whom Thornfield fired in a public humiliation just days before the fraud was exposed. U.S. District Judge Margaret Walsh called Thornfield's actions a stunning betrayal of corporate trust and scientific integrity, noting that his theft of Dr. Vasquez's patents cost investors over $3 billion and threatened to undermine public confidence in American innovation. Dr. Vasquez, who sold her patent rights to Quantum Dynamics Corporation for $1.5 billion, declined to comment on the sentencing but issued a statement saying she was satisfied that justice has been served. Nexus Technologies, which has lost 89% of its market value since the scandal broke, is expected to declare bankruptcy within the week. Industry analysts predict that Quantum Dynamics will acquire Nexus's remaining assets for a fraction of their former value, making Dr. Vasquez's patent sale one of the most lucrative corporate revenge schemes in business history. I read the article 3 times, savoring every word. 12 years in federal prison. Company bankruptcy. Personal and professional destruction. It was everything I'd hoped for and more. But the story wasn't quite finished yet. Thursday afternoon, as I was reviewing offers from venture capital firms eager to fund my new company, my phone rang one final time. Elena, this is Catherine Morrison. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. What's that? We just completed the Nexus acquisition. Bought the entire company for $200 million. You know what that means? I smiled. It means you own everything Marcus built, including his corner office, his parking space, and his nameplate on the building directory. And Elena? Yes. I was wondering if you might be interested in a consulting position. We need someone to oversee the integration of former Nexus employees into our quantum development team. What would that involve? Well, we'd need someone to manage the 23 executives who witnessed your firing. Someone to evaluate their performance and determine who deserves to stay with the new company. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. Catherine, I think I'd be very interested in that position. Excellent. Your first day would be Monday. Oh, and Elena? Yes. We're planning to hold the first staff meeting in the old Nexus boardroom. The same room where Marcus fired you. Thought you might appreciate the symmetry. I closed my eyes and pictured that room. The mahogany table, the glass walls, the 23 chairs where my former colleagues had watched my humiliation. In 4 days, I'd be sitting at the head of that table, reviewing their employment files and deciding their futures. Catherine, I said, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Monday morning, I walked through the doors of the building formerly known as Nexus Technologies, now renamed Quantum Dynamics East Division. The same lobby, the same elevators, the same hallways where I'd worked for 2 years in Marcus's shadow. But everything felt different now. The security guard who used to barely acknowledge me stood up and said, "Good morning, Dr. Vasquez. We're honored to have you here." The elevator operator who never spoke smiled and said, "Congratulations on your new position, m." The receptionist who used to make me wait for meetings practically jumped from her chair. "Dr. Vasquez, Ms. Morrison asked me to escort you to your office personally." My office. Not a basement laboratory, but Marcus's former corner office on the 42nd floor. I sat behind his mahogany desk, in his leather chair, looking out his floor-to-ceiling windows at the city skyline. On the desk was a nameplate that read Dr. Elena Vasquez, Director of Strategic Integration. At 10 a.m., I walked into the boardroom where my career had died and my revenge had been born. 23 chairs surrounded the same table, but this time, I took the seat at the head. One by one, the executives filed in. Some looked nervous. Some looked hopeful. A few looked like they wanted to disappear entirely. The last person to enter was James Chen, the former CTO who'd sent me that apologetic email. He nodded respectfully as he took his seat. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, my voice steady and professional, "thank you for joining me this morning. As you know, Quantum Dynamics has acquired this company and all its assets. Part of that acquisition includes evaluating current personnel for integration into our organization." I opened the folder in front of me, filled with their employment files and performance reviews. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be conducting individual meetings with each of you to discuss your future with quantum dynamics. These conversations will cover your role in the previous administration, your technical contributions, and your perspective on recent events. The VP of Sales, who had smirked during my firing, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I want to be clear, I continued, that quantum dynamics values integrity, innovation, and honesty above all else. Employees who demonstrated these qualities during challenging times will find opportunities for advancement. Those who prioritized politics over principles may find fewer opportunities available. I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes individually. Are there any questions? James Chen raised his hand. Dr. Vasquez, I want to publicly acknowledge that what happened to you in this room was wrong. Several of us should have spoken up, and we didn't. I personally apologize for that failure of leadership. Murmurs of agreement echoed around the table. Even the VP of Sales nodded reluctantly. I appreciate that, James. And I want you all to know that I'm not here for personal vendettas. I'm here to build the best possible team for quantum technology development. Your past actions matter, but they don't define your entire future. It was true, mostly. I wasn't interested in petty revenge against employees who had simply followed orders. But I was very interested in rewarding those who had shown integrity under pressure, and weeding out those who had enabled Marcus's fraud. The meeting ended 30 minutes later with assignments for individual reviews. As the executives filed out, most looked relieved. They'd expected vindictive punishment and instead received professional evaluation. But as the VP of Sales walked past my chair, I said quietly, "Richard, you'll be my first individual meeting. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. His face went pale, but he nodded and left without speaking. The next morning, Richard Stevens sat across from my desk looking like a man facing execution. His employment file made for interesting reading, decent technical skills, strong sales numbers, but a history of playing politics and undermining colleagues he perceived as threats. "Richard," I began, "let's talk about your time at Nexus." "Dr. Vasquez, I want to apologize. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in understanding your decision-making process." He blinked, confused. "When Marcus announced my firing, you smiled. Not just a professional poker face, but actual satisfaction. I'm curious about what you found satisfying about that moment." Richard shifted in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. I thought Marcus was making a strategic decision. I supported my CEO. By taking pleasure in a colleague's humiliation? No, that's not. I wasn't happy about your situation. I was happy that Marcus was showing strong leadership. I leaned back in the chair, studying his face. "Richard, in my experience, people who smile when others fail are usually more concerned about their own position than company success. Dr. Vasquez, please. I have a family. I need this job." Everyone in that room had families, Richard. But not everyone reacted with satisfaction when I was fired. Some looked shocked. Some looked uncomfortable. You looked pleased. I opened his file and pretended to review his sales numbers, letting the silence build. "Your technical performance is adequate," I said finally. "But quantum dynamics requires more than adequate performance. We require character. I can change. I can be better. I'm sure you can. The question is whether you will." I closed the file and looked directly at him. "Richard, I'm going to give you a choice. You can resign today with a positive recommendation letter and 3-month severance. Or you can stay and prove that you're capable of integrity under pressure." What would staying involve? A 6-month probationary period. During that time, you'll report directly to me. Any sign of the political games that made you smile when I was humiliated, and you're gone without severance. He was quiet for a long moment, weighing his options. "I'll stay. And Dr. Vasquez, I really am sorry about that day. Don't apologize to me, Richard. Prove to me that you've learned from it." The individual meetings continued for 2 weeks. Some were easier than others. James Chen received an immediate promotion to senior CTO. 3 junior engineers who had defended my work in private conversations found themselves with significant raises and new responsibilities. But the most satisfying meeting was with Jennifer Walsh, the board secretary who had scheduled that fatal presentation. "Jennifer," I said as she sat down, "I have a question for you." "Of course, Dr. Vasquez." The morning of my presentation to the board, when my computer files were corrupted and my access was revoked, "Did you know that was deliberate sabotage?" She looked uncomfortable but maintained eye contact. "I suspected it wasn't coincidental. But you didn't say anything." "I had no proof. And even if I had, Marcus was my boss. Speaking up without evidence would have meant losing my job. So you chose job security over doing the right thing." "Dr. Vasquez, I have 2 children and a mortgage. I couldn't risk everything on suspicions." I understood her position, but understanding didn't equal approval. "Jennifer, I'm not going to fire you. You're competent at your job, and your personal ethics, while questionable, don't impact technical performance. But I want you to understand something." "Yes, When good people stay silent while bad people act, the bad people win. Marcus was only able to steal my work because people like you chose not to see what was happening." She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "I know. And I've regretted it every day since." "Good. Regret means you learned from it. Don't let it happen again." By the end of the month, the integration was complete. 15 of the 23 executives remained with the company. 8 had been offered generous severance packages and encouraged to seek opportunities elsewhere. But my work wasn't finished yet. On a Tuesday morning in October, exactly 1 year after Marcus had fired me, I received a call that brought everything full circle. "Elena, this is David Richardson. I wanted to let you know that Marcus's appeal was denied. He'll serve the full 12 years. How's he holding up?" "Not well. Prison isn't kind to former Fortune 500 CEOs. But Elena, there's something else. He asked his lawyer to reach out to you." "About what?" "He wants to meet. Face to face. Says he has something important to tell you." The request should have felt like victory. Marcus Thornfield, the man who had stolen my life's work and humiliated me in front of our peers, was now begging for a meeting from his prison cell. But instead of satisfaction, I felt curious. "Set it up," I told David. Federal Correctional Institution Otisville was nothing like the corporate boardrooms where Marcus and I had battled for 2 years. Gray concrete walls, metal detectors, armed guards, and the constant hum of institutional air conditioning. Marcus looked smaller than I remembered. Prison jumpsuit instead of tailored suits. Graying hair grown out instead of perfectly styled. Deep lines around his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant stress. He sat across from me at a metal table in the visitors' room, separated by nothing but 3 feet of space and a lifetime of betrayal. "Elena," he said quietly, "thank you for coming. You said you had something important to tell me." He nodded, but didn't speak immediately. His hands were folded on the table, and I noticed they were shaking slightly. "I've had a lot of time to think over the past year," he said finally. "About choices I made, bridges I burned, people I hurt. And I realized something that I should have understood a long time ago." He looked directly at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, his eyes held no arrogance, no calculation, no hidden agenda. "You were always smarter than me, Elena. Not just technically, but strategically. I spent 2 years trying to steal credit for your work because I knew I could never create anything half as brilliant as QPI. That's what you wanted to tell me? That you're a fraud?" "No. What I wanted to tell you is that you were right." "About what?" "About everything. About corporate integrity. About giving credit where it's due. About the responsibility that comes with leadership." He paused, collecting his thoughts. "Elena, I destroyed my company, my family, and my life because I was too arrogant to admit that a woman 20 years younger than me was a better innovator than I'd ever be." "Marcus, let me finish. Please." I nodded. "I could have promoted you. Made you CTO, given you your own division, shared the credit for QPI development. Instead, I tried to erase you from the story entirely." "Why?" Because I was afraid that if people knew how brilliant you really were, they'd realize how ordinary I was. The admission hung between us like a confession. You know what the worst part is, he continued. In trying to steal your legacy, I destroyed my own. Nobody remembers the companies I built or the deals I closed. They remember me as the CEO who went to prison for stealing patents. Is that what you wanted to tell me? That you're sorry? No, Elena. What I wanted to tell you is congratulations. Congratulations? For doing what I never had the courage to do. For fighting back against injustice. For refusing to let powerful people silence you. He smiled, and for the first time, it wasn't calculating or venomous. You beat me, Elena. Not just legally or financially. You beat me morally. You proved that intelligence and integrity are more powerful than politics and manipulation. Marcus, and more than that, he continued, you proved that revenge doesn't have to make you into a bad person. You could have destroyed everyone who worked for me, ruined innocent people's lives out of anger. Instead, you focused on justice. Some people might say 12 years in prison is excessive revenge. Some people might say stealing 2 years of someone's life work deserves more than 12 years in prison. He leaned back in his chair, and I saw something in his expression I'd never seen before, peace. Elena, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that even though my life is over, I'm glad yours is just beginning. Your life isn't over, Marcus. You're 57 years old. You'll get out when you're 69. That's time to build something new. Maybe. But whatever I build will be in your shadow now. The student became the master, and the master became a cautionary tale. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. Elena, he said finally, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I had more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. I owned the patents to technology that would change the world. I had proven my abilities beyond any doubt and gained the respect of the entire industry. But was I happy? I'm satisfied, I said carefully. Justice was served. That's not the same thing as happiness. No, it's not. What would make you happy, Elena? I thought about it honestly. The revenge had been necessary, but it wasn't fulfilling in the way I'd expected. Destroying Marcus's life hadn't brought back the 2 years I'd spent in his shadow. Success felt hollow when it was built on someone else's failure. Building something, I said finally. Creating something new instead of just reclaiming something stolen. Then do that. What? Build something. Create something. Use your intelligence and your resources and your freedom to make the world better. That's what I'm planning to do. No, Elena. That's what you're saying you'll do someday. I'm talking about doing it now. Today. Stop looking backward at what I took from you and start looking forward at what you can give to the world. The conversation was taking a turn I hadn't expected. Marcus Thornfield, giving me life advice from prison. Why do you care what I do with my future? Because, he said quietly, if something good comes out of the destruction I caused, then maybe my mistakes weren't completely meaningless. I studied his face, searching for manipulation or hidden agenda. But all I saw was genuine regret and something that might have been hope. Marcus, what really happened that day? When you fired me? What were you thinking? He was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. I was thinking that if I destroyed you publicly, completely, you'd never be able to challenge my version of events. I was thinking that fear would keep you silent. Instead, it made me angry. Instead, it made you dangerous. He looked up at me with something that might have been admiration. Elena, I want you to know something. That day in the boardroom, when you said thank you instead of begging or crying or arguing, that was the moment I knew I'd made a terrible mistake. Why? Because someone who responds to destruction with gratitude is either completely broken or completely confident. And you weren't broken. The visiting time was almost over. A guard appeared at the door, tapping his watch. Marcus, I said as we prepared to leave, I do forgive you. His eyes widened in surprise. Not because you deserve it, I continued, but because carrying hatred is exhausting. And you're right, I have better things to do with my time than remain angry at you. Thank you, Elena. That means more than you know. But Marcus? Yes. If you ever get out of here and think about playing corporate games again, remember this conversation. Remember that the next person you try to destroy might not be as forgiving as I am. He smiled, the same smile that had once been venomous but now seemed almost grateful. Elena, I think you're the only person who could destroy me more thoroughly than I destroyed myself. I'll remember. I stood up to leave, then turned back one final time. Marcus? That thing you said about building something instead of just reclaiming something? Yes. You were right. Thank you. 6 months later, I stood in front of a different boardroom, in a building I owned, addressing a team I had assembled. Vasquez Tech had grown from a one-person operation to a 50-employee company developing quantum processing applications for medical research. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced to my team, I'm proud to report that our first quarter results exceeded all projections. More importantly, our QPI applications have contributed to breakthrough treatments for 3 different forms of cancer. The room erupted in applause. These weren't polite golf claps from executives trying to impress their CEO. These were genuine celebrations from scientists and engineers who knew they were changing the world. But, I continued, success brings responsibility. We have the resources and the technology to solve problems that have plagued humanity for decades. The question isn't whether we can do more, it's whether we will. I looked around the room at faces filled with enthusiasm and determination. Young researchers who reminded me of myself 10 years earlier. Experienced scientists who had joined Vasquez Tech because they believed in our mission. Even a few former Nexus employees who had proven their integrity during the transition. So today, I'm announcing our next project, the Vasquez Tech Foundation. 50% of our profits will fund quantum processing research at universities worldwide. Any breakthrough discoveries will be shared freely with the global research community. The applause was even louder this time. After the meeting, as employees filtered out discussing exciting new possibilities, I remained alone in the boardroom. Through the windows, I could see the city skyline and, in the distance, the building that had once been Nexus Technologies. My phone buzzed with a text message from Catherine Morrison. Saw the news about your foundation. Marcus was right. You did become something better than all of us. I smiled and put the phone away. Catherine was wrong, though. I hadn't become something better than anyone else. I had simply become who I was always meant to be. A scientist whose work would outlast any corporate politics or personal vendettas. That evening, I received one final surprise. An email from an address I didn't recognize, S. Thornfield MITTDU. Dr. Vasquez, this is Sarah Thornfield, Marcus's daughter. I wanted you to know that I visited my father last week, and he told me about your meeting. He also asked me to tell you something. He's been following news about Vasquez Tech and your foundation, and is proud of what you've accomplished. He said it proves he was right about your character, even though he was wrong about everything else. Thank you for giving him a chance to apologize. It meant everything to him, and to our family. I read the message twice, then deleted it. Some chapters of our lives are meant to be closed, not revisited. But as I prepared for bed that night, I found myself thinking about Marcus's question, was I happy? The answer, for the first time in years, was yes. Not because I had destroyed my enemy or claimed my revenge, but because I had transformed pain into purpose. The work I was doing now mattered more than any corporate title or patent ownership. The people I employed were solving real problems, not playing political games. Marcus Thornfield had tried to erase me from history. Instead, he had set me free to write my own history. And that night, as I fell asleep in my penthouse apartment overlooking a city full of possibilities, I realized that the best revenge wasn't destroying your enemy. The best revenge was becoming so successful that your enemy became irrelevant. Marcus would serve his 12 years and eventually be released to a world that had moved on without him. His company was gone. His reputation was ruined. His legacy was defined by his worst moment. But I would spend those same 12 years building something that mattered. Creating technology that saved lives. Funding research that advanced human knowledge. proving that brilliance combined with integrity could change the world. In the end, Marcus Thornfield had given me the greatest gift possible, the motivation to become everything he could never be. And for that, I really was grateful. The last text I received that night was from David Richardson. Elena, saw the foundation announcement. Your parents would be proud. Hell, I'm proud. You didn't just win the case, you won at life. I turned off my phone and smiled at the ceiling. Marcus had been right about one thing, the student had become the master. But he'd been wrong about everything else. The master hadn't become a cautionary tale. The master had become a legend. And that night, in a penthouse apartment built with revenge money but furnished with purpose, Dr. Elena Vasquez fell asleep knowing that some stories don't end with victory over your enemies. The best stories end with victory over yourself. The transformation from victim to victor wasn't complete when I sold my patents or when Marcus was sentenced or even when I started Vasquez Tech. It was complete the moment I realized that my greatest accomplishment wasn't destroying the man who wronged me. My greatest accomplishment was building something he never could have imagined. 3 years later, Vasquez Tech quantum processors were being used in hospitals across 6 continents. The Vasquez Tech Foundation had funded breakthrough research at 47 universities. And Dr. Elena Vasquez was no longer known as the woman who destroyed Marcus Thornfield. I was known as the scientist who had revolutionized medicine. Marcus had tried to steal my past, but he had accidentally given me my future. And nothing was ever the same again. What would you do in this situation? Tell me in the comments. If you enjoyed this revenge twist, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.